Hey there, everybody. Welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani, and we are here on This Is How We Grow with our book club. Moving on, I am excited for tonight because tonight is the final chapter in the Gospel according to Spiritism, as dictated by the spirit of Allan Kardec. And then we'll be moving on to a book. Actually, we just started. I've already read the introduction to the next book, if you want to check that out. But basically, it is entitled Naso Lar, which is a Brazilian word, which I think I said completely wrong. But it basically means, our home or astral city. And so we'll be moving on to that one next. Now, as far as tonight goes, as you know, if you were here for the last video, we were just sort of kind of going through the rest of the prayers that are in the Spiritist codexes and who we pray for and what type of prayers there are. And so we're just going to be continuing that, but I'm not reading the actual prayer. I'm just reading like what it's about, and then like we move on to the next thing. So we only have a little bit of that left, and then this book is done. So my question to the viewers is, tonight, if we end up being done before 7:30, would you like me to then end this live and start a new live to continue forward with our new book and get you guys going with that? So let me know in the comments. In the meantime, I want to say thank you to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram. Now, I'm having issues with TikTok. Apparently, I lost the feature to go live. I don't know how that happened. So I'm going to look into that after this stream. But thank you guys for joining me for tonight. Those of you who are joining me for the first time, welcome. This is our book club that we do every Tuesday night. And if I'm lucky, I'll throw in a Thursday, which again, we're not going to do this Thursday. And we meet up to basically read spiritual texts. And the goal is to read spiritual texts from religions all over the world and cultures and traditions from all over the world. But I wanted to start with Spiritism and that whole movement. So we're going to be reading the first couple of books around that. Then we'll move on to a different tradition and read a couple of authors within that and just kind of work our way around the globe. So up to this point, we have done the first 3 books of the Codex. And that was the Spirits book, the Mediums book, and the Gospel according to Spiritism. There are, I believe, 6 in total, 5 or 6 in total. You guys can definitely read those on your own time. Those get a little bit more in depth. Anyways, I am ready. Let me share my screen so that we can get this party started. All right. Prayers for those who are no longer on the earth. So this is a prayer for someone who has just died, okay? So prayers for spirits who have just left the earth do not have only the purpose of providing them with a testimony of symphony, but they also have the effect of helping their disengagement, therefore shortening the state of confusion that always follows the separation and rendering the awakening more peaceful. Moreover, as in any other circumstance, the prayer's effectiveness lies in the sincerity and the thought, and not in the abundance of words spoken more or less pompously, and in which the heart frequently takes no part. Prayers coming from the heart resonate around the spirit whose thoughts are still confused, like friendly voices that have come to lift out of sleep. And then, of course, here's the prayer. And then there's, I believe, another one that we do, there. And now we're on to for persons for whom we have held affection for. How frightful the notion of nothingness is. How we ought to pity those who believe that the voice of friends who weep over friends is lost in the void, unable to find any echo to respond to them. They have never known pure and holy affections. Those who believe that it all dies with the body, and that the spirit who is illuminated the world with its vast intelligence is a combination of matter that is extinguished forever like a gulp of air, that of the most cherished beings, such as a father, a mother, or a beloved child, nothing is left but a handful of dust that time dissipates without return. How could persons of heart remain indifferent to such a thought? How could the idea of complete annihilation not freeze them with terror, and at least make them hope that it is not so? If until now their reasoning has not been sufficient to remove their doubt, Spiritism has come to dissipate all uncertainty regarding the future by providing material proof of the survival of the soul and the existence of beings beyond the grave. And that is why such proof has been welcomed with joy everywhere. Confidence is reborn because people know from this day onward that life on the earth is nothing but a short passage that leads to a better life, that their efforts in this world are not lost to them, and that their holiest affections are not destroyed without hope. And then they get into the prayer. Then we have a prayer for suffering souls who ask for prayers, right? So not all suffering souls ask for prayers. That's something I definitely want you guys to know. There are suffering souls that don't mind being where they are, if that makes any sense. In order to understand the consolation that prayer can provide to suffering spirits, one needs to recall their mode of action as explained above. Those who are imbued with the truth pray more fervently due to the certainty of not praying in vain. We have a prayer for a deceased enemy. So charity towards our enemies should follow them beyond the grave. We must realize that harm they did to us was a trial that might have been useful for our advancement if we knew how to take advantage of it. It could have been even more advantaged than purely material afflictions in that, along with courage and resignation. It allowed us to add to it charity and the forgetfulness of offenses. We have a prayer for our criminals. And if the effectiveness of prayers were proportional to their length, the longest ones ought to be reserved for the guiltiest persons because they have more need than those who have led virtuous lives. To refuse prayers to criminals is to lack charity and to misunderstand God's mercy. To believe they are pointless because a person has committed this or that wrong is to prejudge the Most High justice. We have prayers for suicides. A human being never have the right to dispose of their own life, for only God can take them from their earthly captivity when appropriate. Nevertheless, divine justice may soften its rigors in accordance with the circumstances, but it is reserved in all its severity for those who have wished to remove themselves from the trials of life. Suicides are like prisoners who escape from prison before having served their sentence, and who, when recaptured, are guarded more severely. Such is the case with suicides who, believing they are escaping their present miseries, only immerse themselves in even greater unhappiness. So again, I'm usually not as flippant as I just was, but I need you to understand that, yeah, it's written for a certain time. Yeah, it's written for certain people. Yeah, it's written by a certain people, etc., etc. Regardless, suicides, homicides, any type of death that is very traumatic is not only traumatic for the person going through it, but it for the people that they leave behind. And so I understand that when I'm reading this could be tough for some people to listen to, especially since it's being spoken by a spirit with such confidence, right? And I think that that's something we should really just kind of pause and take note of, right? That confidence is there because there is a detachment from emotion. You know what I mean? You know, when these spirits pass through certain stages, there's a less inclination to not be not understanding, but to be less engaging and compassionate towards that. Not compassionate, engaging in that. So that is not to make excuses for the way this is written. And that's to not make excuses for the beliefs itself. I personally myself don't believe in a lot of the more modern views of suicide. I still think we have a very, very primitive view of how we should treat suicides after death. I think we're starting to get it now. I think we're starting to get it in terms of them being alive right now, and how we can help prevent it, and how we can help intervene, and how we can help, see signs or whatever. But we can educate ourselves while they're there and while they're alive, and we can try our best. But at the end of the day, when these things happen, those of us who deal with them on the other side need to be just as sensitive. And I think that that's something that's lacking in a lot of spaces, spiritual spaces. And I have a very soft spot for suicides. I've lost a lot of people to suicide, people that I really, really cared about. So to me, this is very, very personal. So I get it, and I apologize if this bothered you and I didn't give you a trigger warning ahead of time. I'm just, not that I'm numb to it, I'm just so used to reading it over and over and over again. So I've learned to detach myself, if that makes sense. So now the next prayer is for repentant spirits, right? So these are spirits that are looking to change, right? So it would be unjust to rank in the category of bad spirits those suffering and repentant spirits who ask for prayers. They might have been bad spirits, but they are no longer. So when they acknowledge and lament their wrongs, they are only unhappy. Some have even begun to enjoy a relative happiness. Very interesting. I actually wrote a whole paper about this in my journal, my spiritual journal, regarding repentant spirits and like us, like people, humans, and how close we are. We have prayers for the hardened spirits. So these bad spirits are those who have not yet been touched by repentance, who take pleasure in wrongdoing and feel no remorse for it, who are insensitive toward reproach, and who spurn prayer and often blaspheme God's name. These are what we call hardened souls, who, after death, take vengeance on incarnates for the suffering they endure, and persecute with their hatred those whom they hated when they were alive, whether by means of obsession or by any sort of harmful influence that they may have the fluid to do, the current to do, right? Because again, a spirit can only do as much as they are capable of, and as much as they can obtain the fluids from their environment and from the people in their environment to make meaningful changes in the environment, right? So among perverse spirits, there are two distinct categories: those who are downright wicked and those who are hypocritical. The former are infinitely easier to lead to the good than the latter. The former are most often brutish and coarse of character, similar to what we see among incarnates who commit wrongdoings more out of instinct than intent, or impulse than intent, and who do not try to pass themselves off as being any better than they actually are. There is, however, a latent seed in them that must be brought forth, and one almost always accomplishes doing so with perseverance and firmness combined with benevolence, as well as through good counsel, reasoning, and prayer. So in mediumship, the difficulty they have in writing God's name is an indication of an instinctive fear of an inner voice of the conscious that tells them they are unworthy of it. Those to whom this applies are on the threshold of conversion, and one can hold out all hope for them. All one has to do is to find the vulnerable spot in their heart. Hypocritical spirits are nearly always highly intelligent, but they do not have one sensitive fiber in their heart. Nothing moves them. They feign all the good sentiments to win someone's trust, and they are happy whenever they find anyone foolish enough to accept them as holy spirits and whom they can subject to their will. Far from inspiring in them the least bit of fear, God's name serves them as a mask to cover their turpitudes. In the invisible world, as in the visible world, hypocrites are the most dangerous because they act in the shadows without anyone suspecting them. They put on the appearance of having faith, but this faith is not authentic. These are what we call trickster spirits in some cases. So hypocritical spirits, basically any spirit that will lie to you in your search of looking for a particular energy or a particular spirit. So if you're looking for your dead grandma, they will pretend to be your dead grandma. If you're looking for a goddess to venerate on your pantheon, they will pretend to be that goddess. If you're looking for, you know what I mean? And they will play the part. They will play the part oh so very well. We also have prayers for the sick and the obsessed, right? So let's start off with the sick first. So sicknesses are part of the trials and vicissitudes of earthly life, right? They are inherent to the coarseness of our material nature and the low degree of our evolution on the worlds in which we inhabit. The passions and excesses of all sorts sow in us the unhealthy seeds, and they're often hereditary. So these are things like, alcoholism, diabetes, mental health issues, things like this, but more so the excesses, things that you actually get yourself sick with. And then because of that, those things get passed down, right? So addictions, right? So on worlds that are more physically or morally advanced, the more purified and less material human organism is not subject to the same infirmities, and the body is not quietly undetermined by the devastation of the passions. Thus, we must resign ourselves to endure the consequences of the environment into which our less evolved nature has placed us until we merit a transfer. So while waiting for this to happen, it should not keep us from doing what depends on us to better our current situation. But if, despite our efforts, we fail to do so, Spiritism teaches us to resignedly bear our transitory ills, right? So if God had not wanted bodily sufferings to be dissipated or softened in certain cases, then God would not have placed healing means at our disposal. God's providence solicitude in this regard, in conformity with the instinct of preservation, indicates that it is our duty to seek and apply them. So this is yet another piece I kind of want to pause at, because this is a thought that is not uncommon at this time, right? So, you'll have things like, not doing blood donating because, you don't believe saving a life that is supposed to die because they don't have enough blood should die because that's God's will, when you have the remedy right there. So that's different, right? What they're saying here is, once you have exhausted every possible physical means that you can think of, And once your body has endured its maximum, it cannot endure anymore, and there's still need, then obviously this is what's meant to be, right? But here is where many spiritists and many, espiritistas, and, even many Catholics and Christians will say, this is where the faith comes in, right? So this part is not talking about what we can't do. This is describing a sickness. This is describing an ill, and this is describing what is going on, right? But you need to understand that we believe in hope, we believe in faith, and we believe that those kinds of things can happen. Miracles, interventions, because we believe that spirits can intervene. That's part of the Spiritist doctrine, right? So alongside the usual medication developed by science, magnetism has enabled us to understand the power of the fluidic action. Afterward, Spiritism came to reveal us yet another power in healing mediumship and the influence of prayer. Boom. So those are our two methods, prayer, and those of us who take on the work of being a healer, magnetism, the ability to manipulate fluids, right? So this is a prayer for the obsessed, right? So obsession is the persistent action that a bad spirit exerts upon an individual. It presents very distinct characteristics from a simple moral influence without any perceivable outward signs to the complete disturbance of the organism and mental faculties. It obliterates all mediumistic faculties. In writing mediumship, it is displayed by the tendency of one particular spirit to manifest itself to the exclusion of all others. So let's pause what they're saying here. And I know a lot of people may be like, well, what does that mean from a simple moral influence without any perceivable outward signs? So what that means is that it starts off slow. And what that slowness looks like is much more perceivable to the person, like going through it, than to people who know them, in that they might be like, oh, well, this is weird, but then they brush it off. And that brushing it off can be a problem, right? So like, this is weird could be something like, and I'm off the cuff, just throwing out an example. Please, if you do this, you don't think that you are obsessed with any spirits, okay? But I'm just throwing this out here. But like, I don't know, let's say you're sitting on the couch and like you're watching a show and you just get this urge to just grab the stapler that's on the thing and just staple through your hand. You just punch your hand with it and you're like, oh, and you get like this rush. And then you kind of snap out of it for a second. You're like, and you look at you, you're like, well, first of all, ow, this is very painful. Second, you're like, what was that all about? And then you chalk it up to, oh, it was adrenaline. I was really pumped up during my show, or, oh, a random thought, popped in my head. I got triggered and I just needed to let something out. You chalk it up to something, right? That could be a situation. Another situation could be even smaller than that. I mean, that was kind of an obvious one, but like even smaller than that, intrusive thoughts is what they say, right? Intrusive thoughts, depressive thoughts, suicidal tendencies. These are all things that will be perceivable to the person going through it, but will be kind of brushed off the rug or looked at as like, oh, well, I can handle it. I have faith. I'm good. I'm fine. But then after a while, it'll start to manifest in like disinterest in certain hobbies. You won't pray as often. You're not taking care of your altars as often. You stop practicing your divination, and you start to disconnect from spirit, so that you become more isolated, and then progression, and it gets worse, right? So then this is where we start to see the ladder towards a possession, right? So these are the kinds of prayers, these are the kinds of things we kind of look out for, and these are the kind of prayers that will be incorporated among a helaton others and a bunch of other types of ritual and routine, right? So bad spirits, right? They swarm all around the earth as a result of the low degree of its inhabitants' moral evolution. Their malevolent action comprises part of the afflictions targeting humankind in this world. And like all the illnesses and tribulations of life, obsessions must therefore be regarded as a trial or an expiation and be accepted as such. Just as an illness are a result of the physical imperfections that render the body accessible to pernicious exterior influences, obsession is always the result of a moral imperfection that exposes the body to a bad spirit. To a physical cause, one applies a physical force. To a moral cause, it is necessary to apply a moral force. To prevent illnesses, one strengthens the body. To avert obsessions, one must strengthen the soul. Hence, for obsessed persons, the necessity to work for their own betterment, which is often quite enough to free them from their obsessor without the help of other persons. However, such help becomes necessary when the obsession degenerates into subjugation and possession, because then patients sometimes lose their willpower and their free will. Obsession is nearly always the result of vengeance carried out by a spirit, and most often it originated in the relationships that the obsessed person had with the spirit in a previous existence. In cases of grave obsession, it is as if the obsessed person is enveloped and impregnated with a pernicious fluid that neutralizes and repels the actions of healthy fluids. It is, therefore, necessary to rid the person from the malevolent fluid. However, a malevolent fluid cannot be deflected by a similar one. By means of an action identical to that of a healing medium in cases of illness, it is necessary to expel the malevolent fluid with the aid of a better fluid that somehow produces a reactive effect. All right? So you can't get rid of a spirit with another spirit that vibes at the same frequency, or you can't get rid of that spirit with a medium who also vibes at that frequency. You have to get rid of a spirit with or with a medium that can subjugate it by its spiritual elevation, by its light, and it'll usually cause a reaction within the spirit and within the person. That reaction can also be very volatile, but we'll talk about that at a later time. So this is the mechanical action. Like, that's like what biologically is happening with the fluids, right? But it is not enough. It is also and especially necessary to act upon the intelligent being who must be addressed with authority. And this authority derives only from moral ascendancy. The greater the ascendance, the greater the authority. Meaning, you can't tell your kid not to smoke if you smoke. In that one particular instance, you ain't shit. You have no authority. You have no right to demand that because you smoke. It is the same thing here. You cannot demand a spirit or command a spirit to do anything if you yourself are not on a higher moral ground, if your spirit themselves are not also on a higher moral and intellectual ground, right? Because that's the whole point of subjugation. That's like the whole point of the hierarchy, right? Now, I need to have a whole conversation, by the way, because I've been seeing a lot of stuff online about this sort of repulsion away from, the language of duality and polarity and high vibe, low vibe, and all that. And I need you guys to understand something clearly. We live in a world of duality. Like, that is what's happening around us. Our language is dual. That is what we have at our disposal. when you are expressing experiences, your experiences will be expressed with language that falls on a spectrum between 2 points. We live in a world of time, right? So to say, that there's no hierarchy, or to say that there's no like levels to this, there is. It's not in the way that you think. It's not about this spirit is better than that spirit. It's not about that. It's about what spirit runs what thing. So for example, okay, this spirit that we're talking about right now, it hasn't been made clear as to whether or not the obsessed person is being obsessed by a spirit that was never incarnate. Or actually, no, it did. That it's most likely a person from a past life. Okay. So in this particular case, we're dealing with the dead. But like, let's say we're dealing with an actual like spirit that governs things that we would consider on the spectrum of being kind of like more on like the negative end, more on like the, you gotta tread lightly side, right? You know what I mean? And let's say that that's the case, and this particular spirit has very high ranking in that space. Okay. If you yourself, being in this neutral space, were to go into that space, you wouldn't have authority there. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't be that, because in order to be there, you would have to descend. You would have to put yourself in a place. You know what I'm saying? And so in that particular space and time, in that particular reality, in that particular realm, in that particular current, like whatever you want to say that space is, that space occupies a particular current, a particular degree of fluidity, of vibration, of frequency. And it's not about one being better. It's about those frequencies being different. And when you have spirits that are in charge of certain frequencies, it doesn't matter where you have authority, except for God, of course. God is that's the only thing that we can, when we're in places that are not our own, it's the only thing that will protect us, right? But ultimately, like, no matter how high ranking you are in your particular place, when you go to that particular space, that is not, it will be of the opposite effect, the neutralizing effect. Okay. And as my students know, right, when you have an element that is causing too much havoc, you can neutralize that effect, right? It's the same thing with the spirit world. It's the same thing with these energies. So it's not about high vibe, low vibe, as in, I'm better and you're worse. It's about, this is note C on the scale of music, and this is note D on the scale of music. Like, obviously C is on the higher part of the scale, but it's a note. We're making music. We're doing the thing. Okay. That's what I'm trying to express here. And that is not all. To ensure liberation, the wicked spirit must be led to renounce its bad intentions. It is necessary to awaken in repentance and the desire to do good. With the help of ably directed instructions and the particular evocations made with its moral education in mind, then we may have a twofold satisfaction of delivering an incarnate and converting an imperfect spirit. Okay. The job becomes easier when the obsessed person understands his or her situation and lends the concourse of his or her will powers and prayers. This cannot occur if the person seduced by the deceiving spirit is deluded regarding the qualities of the dominating spirit and takes pleasure in the error in which the spirit has immersed him or her. For then, rather than helping, the obsessed person spurns all assistance. This is the case with fascination, always infinitely more rebellious than the most violent subjugation. In all cases of obsession, prayer is the most powerful aid for acting upon the obsessing spirit. and that is prayer to God specifically, right? Let us keep moving. Hold on. Okay. So the healing of grave obsessions demands much patience, perseverance, and devotion. It also demands tact and skill to lead frequently extremely perverse, hardened, and cunning spirits to the good, because there are those who are rebellious to the highest degree. In most cases, one must proceed according to the circumstances, but whatever may be the character of the spirit, it is a sure fact that nothing can be obtained by violence or threat. All influences lies in one's moral ascendancy. On other truth, also proven by experience as well as by logic, is the complete ineffectiveness of exorcisms, formulas, sacramental words, amulets, talismans, external practices, or any material symbol. Greatly prolonged obsessions may cause pathological disorders and sometimes require simultaneous or subsequent magnetic and or medical treatment to establish the organism back to homeostasis, basically. Once the cause is destroyed, all that remains is to combat the effects, meaning the body is going to be in shambles. The body and the mind is most likely going to be in shambles. And after a causa or a cause is effectively and successfully removed, now you have to then heal the body. And this is why a lot of espiritistas are also curanderas, because the more you can do for your people, the less they have to reach out to more people. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's hard enough. I mean, you already know the medical system. You got to see your general practitioner first for a referral to see this motherfucker. Then you got to see that motherfucker who then sends a request for you to go get blood work done over here and see this other specialist because you might have this thing. No. Get it all done by the one guy, right? So that's the goal, hopefully, for a lot of us. And for the rest of us, listen, if you just want to focus on just being a psychic medium, that is like phenomenal. That is phenomenal. You are still doing the work. You know what I'm saying? You're still doing the work. All I ask as someone who, if you're interested in these types of beliefs is that, you do so with a higher purpose in mind, a higher, you know what I'm saying? So that you stay on the right and narrow if you can. So today they believe and their faith is unshakable because it is based on evidence and demonstration, and because it satisfies reason. Such is the faith of Spiritists, and the proof of their strength is that they endeavor to make themselves better, to control their evil inclinations, and to put into practice Christ's maxims regarding all humans as brothers and sisters, regardless of race, caste, or sect, forgiving their enemies and repaying evil with good in accordance with the divine model. A strictly rational and scientific study of facts that reveal the communication of human beings with spirits accomplished by the spirit Allan Kardec resulted in a codification of the Spiritist doctrine, which was systemized according to scientific, philosophical, and religious aspects, beginning in 1854 and lasting until his death in 1869. Kardec's endeavor was comprised of 5 basic works: the Spiritist book, the Medium's book, the Gospel according to Spiritism, which is where we will stop, Heaven and Hell, and Genesis. In addition to that book, he also has What is Spiritism? And he also has several little booklets of the Spiritist Review, which are kind of like journals. And those are really hard to find. Really, really hard to find. So this is all just basically explaining that all of this will be so very helpful to you. I'm not here to really, I don't really want to convert anyone, but this is basically what that's all about. All right. But I will end it here. I will end it here. Those of you who are interested in that, last entry, hit me up and we'll do another video. Okay. It turns out that we actually did end on time, so that's nice. That is nice. So are there any questions? Any questions at all? How are we feeling? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me on this Tuesday night. I look forward to seeing all of you guys soon. Hi, Joey. No problem. Thank you. All right, guys, you have a beautiful night. So much love to you all. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. This is how we grow.